Hi there, and welcome to your clean recording on writing a research paper. This is just going to be a quick overview of how to do it, and then each week we will talk about things a little bit more specifically. Okay, so the first thing is that you're going to demonstrate your knowledge of how to plan for a research paper by choosing a topic and then completing the research paper. So, the next thing, when we talk about a research paper, we need to talk about what is the purpose of the research paper. And that is to give information. It is not to be entertainment. It is more for information and knowledge, and you'll be taking a stand on an issue. You'll support it, or you will say, no, that's not how it works. And you're going to do that by giving evidence from your research. In other words, you'll go to books, encyclopedias, newspapers, online sources, and you'll find textual, factual evidence that supports your belief or your idea. And then you're going to write that paper and you're going to include citations. And citations are how we give credit to other sources. So in a research paper, we do not expect, and in fact, it would be not a very good research paper if it came back all your own ideas. So we need to prove where we got these ideas that support this evidence that we're using as support. And so we need to make sure we give that credit to where it is due. Okay, the first thing you need to do is clarify your assignment. You need to pick your specific topic, and I'm going to give you a couple options, and you need to pick one. You need to realize that the length of your paper will be 6 to 9 pages, which is about 1,800 to 2,700 words. Now that sounds a lot, but remember, you will be borrowing some words from some other people, so it really won't be as much as you think. Then you need to make sure you have at least 4 sources. That means 4 different places or people that you have evidence from. And at least one of those needs to be a print source. In other words, a book, a newspaper, a magazine. Now remember, it is okay to find those online, but they do need to be originally publication, or their original publication needs to be in print form. Let's see. What citation format is required? It will be MLA. It's the Modern Language Association, which is what most high schools use. And remember, ask me any questions you may have as you go along. Here are your possible topic choices. Beowulf is a portrait of the Anglo-Saxon feudal system. Shakespeare's history plays as a reflection of the real English history. Elizabeth Barrett Browning and the role of women in the Victorian age. Romantic poetry as a response to the Industrial Revolution. The 19th century novel as an examination of the British class system. You can either use Hard Times by Charles Dickens or Pride and Prejudice, by the way, my favorite, by Jane Austen. Chinua Achebe's fiction as depiction of social change in the British colony. How William Butler Yeats' Irish identity shaped his poetry. Or you can talk about the question of authorship in Shakespeare's plays. Now remember, these are just topics. You will need to come up with the actual question that you are trying to solve in your research paper. Step 2, develop a research question. This is what I was talking about. You need to provide a focus for your research paper, so you need to look at your topic. What interests you most about that topic? Make a list of questions you might like to answer. What would capture the interest of the reader? Pick an issue that can be researched. Remember, there might be some great questions, but if there's no way to find out the answer or to find out a lot of evidence, then that may not be the question you want to do for this paper. Don't make it harder on yourself by picking too broad of a question. You want it to be narrow enough that you can find answers that will support your question, that will support the answer you want. Like I said, make sure you pick an issue that can be researched and make sure the topic is not too broad or narrow. Again, when you turn in your questions, I will kind of help you out with that, saying that might be a little too much to research, or that might be not enough to research. This is what factors most influence police on use of deadly force. Okay, so here are some questions. What is the relationship between an officer's shift and the likelihood that the officer will use deadly force? So like, would you use more if you were in the AM shift or in the PM shift? What is the relationship between the violent crime rate of an area and the likelihood that an officer will use deadly force? If you are living in some cute little quaint suburb town where really people don't get in trouble, then you probably won't be using deadly force that often. But if you work inner city where there's violence all the time, or I'm from Chicago, Southside Chicago is a little rough, then yeah, that's where you're gonna probably find a higher likelihood of police using deadly force. What is the relationship between an officer's level of education and the likelihood that an officer will use deadly force? That's a very interesting question that I have no idea what the answer would be. So that's a great question. That might interest me the most, so I might go there. All right, so step 3, you're going to begin doing the research. This is where you're going to look for peer-reviewed articles versus Google search. So what you're looking for is accuracy versus bias. Bias means that they already don't like somebody or already have a negative or super positive view, so they're not going to give you the correct information. For example, if you were researching Jane Austen, and I had written an article on Jane Austen. Well, I love Jane Austen. Pride and Prejudice is like the best thing ever in my mind. So I might be a little biased in my article. So you might question, is that a good article to go with my research? Now, that doesn't mean if you find something that is against your side or opposite your viewpoint, you don't use that. That would be unethical. So if you find something that shows that maybe you were wrong, maybe you need to change your question, but don't try and hide that evidence. But you don't want to go to Wikipedia. You want to, you don't want to go People magazine for certain things. You would want to go to Newsweek or a book that someone has done a lot of research on. You don't want to find like a weekly magazine. So make sure there's accuracy, authority. Make sure it's someone that's done their research, that knows what they're talking about. And currency. Always look for the most current data because things change, and you want to make sure that you have the most current data in your research. You don't want to be left behind. Again, avoid Wikipedia or blogs or statements from non-experts. Okay, this is really important, academic integrity. This is where you need to make sure you cite all of your sources. You never want to represent the ideas or words of another as your own. That is plagiarism. And it can result in you being dismissed from school. Not just K-12, but this happens in college and all schools. Plagiarism is a very, very, very bad thing, okay? You see a lot of rappers and DJs and other artists that get sued because they're supposedly have plagiarized other people's music, whether it's the music or the words or the bass, whatever it may be. I know Vanilla Ice did it way back in the day. I think Blurred Lines recently is in trouble with Pharrell and Robin Thicke. So it can happen. You just really need to make sure you never, it's okay to borrow, but you need to give credit. I personally didn't do this when I was a kid, or I didn't like to do it using index cards, but then one day I found the value. The greatest thing about using index cards to take notes on is that you can move them around. They're like your own virtual kind of map that you can say, oh, well, this quote, this piece of information, this fact doesn't go where I want it to, so I'm going to set it over the side and see where it will fit in later. On each index card, you really want to make sure you have a direct quote. That means you take it word for word and you put quotations around that. That's so important when you're taking notes, that you put it in quotations. That way, when you put it into your paper, there is absolutely no doubt what words you borrowed. If you are going to summarize something and put that summary on a note card, that means you will not have any quotation marks and you're just taking like a big paragraph and you're putting it into a sentence or two. Paraphrase means it's roughly the same size. So if I'm paraphrasing a paragraph, my notes will be a paragraph long. Whereas if I'm summarizing that paragraph, it will only be a sentence. All of these need to be cited, and the information on the back of the card for the future. So you need to make sure when you're doing your research, you're not writing your paper yet. You just want to take as much information in as possible. You don't have to use it all, Some of it you may like, some of it you may go, oh, that just doesn't fit where I think, and maybe your topic or your thesis might change a little bit as you do your research, and that's all okay. But the most important thing is that you are able to then prove what is yours and what is not. That is the most important. This is to save you. So when you cite other sources, you are saving yourself being considered a plagiarist, okay? So you need to make sure you are able to prove that you got it from somewhere. Citation states where you got the information. Again, we'll use MLA. You're going to need the author, year of publication, title of the work, name of the journal or publisher. You can go to multiple sites, and I'll have some in Live Binder about that can help you. But if you just get the main, I mean, even nowadays it's so easy. You can take a picture of the page. You can take a screenshot, and that will help. When you're using a website, you need to make sure you have the URL. Okay, so down here, this is what you would put on a note card. This is the direct quote, and we know that because it's got quotation marks. Then this is where did we get it from, and here's the MLA format. Okay, this is what each card should have. This should be on one side of your note card. This would all be on the other. Oops. This is an example of paraphrasing. Again, you still have the paraphrase material. Oopsie, I just changed my card. And then you also have the MLA format. What is unacceptable is if there's no reference to the source, the following use of the debris material would be unacceptable. In other words, I can't use this in my paper if I don't know where it came from and who wrote it. Okay? So this would be okay, because you're saying as debris noted, so we know who the author is, and you're giving a page number. Again, we'll get more into the MLA in the upcoming weeks, but this is just, again, an overview. Okay, then you're going to develop a thesis statement. This is to focus your ideas and information within the paper and provides guidance to the reader. Your topic plus your position equals your thesis statement. So the example, adult students returning to college make up higher percentage of entering students than they did 20 years ago because of a number of statistical, economic, and social reasons. So your topic is adult students returning to college. Your position is that they are a larger percent, and your thesis is this whole thing together. Okay, organize your ideas. This is where you're going to use an outline, you're going to use mapping, you're going to arrange your index cards, however you want, and we'll have some handouts for examples, like the scaffolding handout I gave you, perfect example of what to use for this. And you're going to sequence your ideas so that they fit your thesis statement. Then the next thing is you're going to create your first draft. You're going to have an introduction, which is the opportunity to capture the interest of the reader, and you present your thesis statement. Then you will do a body, which is all your paragraphs supporting your thesis statement. This is where you're going to introduce new ideas and textual evidence. And the conclusion, you don't want to enter any new information in the conclusion, but that's going to summarize all your main points and remind the readers why they should believe your thesis. The next step will be to begin revisions and proofreading. This is where you're going to make sure, have I said what I wanted to say in a clear and effective way? Have I provided enough evidence to support your thesis? Is your information presented in the most effective order? In other words, do you have too much in there, not enough in there? If you put this thought up here, would it make it better, or does it just flow? And then do you leave any questions in the mind of a reader? Think about your research paper kind of like you're on trial. The jury wants to know, is there a reasonable doubt? Okay, so in your proofreading, not only are you checking for grammar and everything, of course, but did you leave a reasonable doubt, or are your readers going to be convinced that you are correct, that your research backs up your statement? Like I said, you're also going to be doing proofreading, which is grammar. Do you use consistent verb tense, variation in your words? You don't want to use the same words over and over again. You don't want to do everything first, second, third, or then also another. You need to make sure you use a thesaurus, or Google is great for helping you pick different words. Can you take any unnecessary things out of your sentences? Did you use spell check? Did you use grammar check? Do you have proper punctuation? I am horrible about this, so I always need to have someone else proofread my stuff because I am great at proofreading other people's, but my own, my brain knows what it should say, so it just kind of skips mistakes. So if you're like me, then you need to make sure you definitely have a friend or a parent or someone else other than your teacher or you to proofread. Then you're going to make sure your site sources are documented and you're going to create your works cited page. Again, here's some information about it, and we will be going over this in class, but there's tons of stuff out there. If you Google MLA source or works cited page, it'll give you all the details on how to do that. So that we have one page at the end. Sometimes it's been called a bibliography, but we make sure we know all the sources you used, and you need at least 4. Oops. This was an example right here of what it would look like on the works cited page. Okay? And always the entries are listed in alphabetical order. Step 9, you'll do your final reading and make any last minute revisions. And so that means you take all the stuff that people who have proofread or that any flow issues you may have had, and you make those changes, and then you're ready to submit your final paper. Always keep a copy of your paper on file, and what I mean by this is I don't care if you copy and paste it into the Dropbox or what you do, but you need to make sure you have a copy because you know the internet is tricky and sometimes you think you sent something and you didn't, and you just want to make sure you have it backed up. I personally like using Dropbox or Google Drive, so that way wherever I'm at, I have access to that document. Personally, Google Drive is really, really handy. All right, so this is kind of a little visual, and so pre-writing is where you start, and then you go to drafting, and then you kind of go to revising, and then you go to proofreading, and then publishing. But when you plan your paper, make sure you think about these things. You prepare by figuring out your topic, write your thesis, build your research by finding the information and the evidence, then you write your first draft, then you revise it. Again, this is another example of a student thesis. What is the difference that you see in these two thesis statements? Why is one more effective than the other? Well, okay, let's look at thesis 1. Some of Poe's best poetry uses parallelism, sorry, that word's hard, and imagery. Thesis 2. When Poe as a poet is in his best form, as in The Raven, his language is striking for its intense parallel structure and the richness of its imagery and its memorable melodic sound. Well, Thesis 2 is actually kind of giving you parallelism and imagery. So it definitely gives the reader a more specific view of what you will be talking about. Again, you're going to draft. When you're drafting, don't worry so much about your punctuation right at that time. Keep track of the page numbers from what you are quoting. So that way if you need to go back and move things around or you forgot, is this a direct quote or not, then you definitely will be able to find it quickly. Okay, so right now, this week, the first thing that will be done is to pick your topic and enter a question, the question you'll be researching. Your thesis sentence will be coming soon, and then you will start the rest of your paper. Again, revising, run spell and grammar check, carefully proofread, make sure everything flows, and ask someone outside of you and your teacher to review your essay. Okay, this is what is research question. It is a question about an aspect of your topic. It guides you in your research. So that's the one question that we've asked you to come up with in the beginning. And then what makes a good research question is it's not too vague, it's not too specific. It's just enough of a question that you can find a good amount of information. Not like, why do people love Jane Austen? You could research that till the end of time, but you would need to find why, how does the use of sarcasm in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice help shape women's role in society? That would be something that would be way more specific and you can actually find the answers to. Okay, so research question versus thesis. The research question always comes first because you may change your thesis as you find the research. When you evaluate a source, oops, you want to make sure, there we go, that it is an appropriate source. Is the site sponsored by someone? If so, who? Is it a government page? And if it's a government page, have they done their research? Or is it done by Perez Hilton? You know, these are very important tips that you need to figure out to make sure that your sites are legitimate. Okay, let's see. That is the end, and I will see you in CC. Thank you.